Hey, what's up? This is Jake, your Jake Shop. Go ahead and do another update on the 68. Got a Detroit Speed front suspension we'll be doing in these clips. I actually reviewed some of the video of doing this entire process and it sucks, but I'm going to go ahead and splice it together and at least get an update out there. Turned out really well. I've got some new video equipment that I'm going to try and be using on some of my next videos, and kind of getting away from the how-to stuff and more just kind of updates on the car as I progress, because it's going to start going a lot faster. So if you like it, or if there's anything that's kind of interesting to see through this process, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Thanks.
Okay, so I was fortunate enough to find a Detroit Speed system online, used. Probably less than 4,000 miles on this suspension, so I've started to take it apart, but I'll show you what happened here. Basically, on this style of suspension that Detroit Speed stopped making here recently, you actually cut off the stock upper mounts and you weld these into place. What has happened here is this really beautiful TIG weld is rather small, and it cracked along the entire back edge of the TIG. That happened, but also the gusseting on this side, whatnot, has pulled up from the frame here. So that bracket is bent in. And got a similar situation going here. It's actually bent slightly in as well. So I'm going to be obviously reusing these brackets, carefully cutting these out with my angle grinder, and you know, taking the adjustable coilovers off. You know, that's the other reason I decided to do this. I do want it slightly lower in the front than the back. Stock is going to be a little high, so this will allow me to adjust the suspension really easily to get it to the height that I want. You know, this has a huge sway bar. It's got great bushings, way better geometry than stock. So that suspension is going to be coming off. I am going to reuse these brakes. You know, mainly the problem is with the system. I actually got a really sweet set of brakes on this when I bought it, but you know, this is a completely different style hub. I think it's a Corvette style hub. Anyways, newer brake, disc brake, you know, just pop on and off. On that style of brake, you know, the bearings are actually part of the hub. Well, they're inside it. This one they're not, you know, it's completely separate. So this hub will go with the brake system when I go sell it. But it's stock spindles, so I'll be reusing those. You know, obviously it's got all brand new bushings and ball joints and everything else. The other thing that's really nice about this suspension system, it came with a brand new steering gear as well. So you know, actually the steering gear on this and the steering on this is pretty solid. Even the bushings on this old system aren't bad, but heck, for the money, I just think I'm going to get way better ride handling. It'll be a nice little upgrade to the car. And you know, the other thing that's really cool, Detroit Speed makes some of the best suspension systems out there. They really do. They are not cheap. The guy that I bought this from actually went to their brand new subframe and their whole new suspension package. So it's secondhand, but it's in phenomenal shape. Like I said, probably less than 4,000 miles on it. So it'll be a great little upgrade to this car that'll make it, you know, that much easier to drive, that much better to drive, that much better handling, and it wasn't too expensive. And I went ahead and called Detroit Speed and said, hey, I picked up one of your systems on Craigslist. The key to this system is these points right here. You know, there's a lot of welding, cutting, and fabbing to get this system onto that other subframe. They actually have a jig that goes in here and helps locate those exactly where they need to be by bolting them into the motor mount points. So they are so cool. They sent me the CAD drawing for the bracket that goes in here that helps locate these points. I just think that's, you know, you don't find that type of thing anymore. Everyone wants to sell you more stuff, and you know, obviously next time I'm in the market, I'll be buying stuff from them. That's just really cool of them to do that for me. Okay, so I'm showing the next step in the process. I've got the front suspension components off of the old frame now. I still have that frame together, but I kind of kept it together a little bit just to make it easier when it goes back together, kind of keep the bolts and the brackets and everything together. But what's going on over here, so what I did is I used the CAD drawing that Detroit Speed was so kind to send me, and I took a bunch of measurements to verify that these brackets are now in the correct spot. And how I got those back in the correct spot was, you know, I relief cut along those edges and I bent that back into place where it was supposed to be. and then confirmed it with the CAD drawing. So everything's there where it needs to be. So I'm creating a jig now. Just took some angle iron, drilled some holes the exact same size diameter as this. These bolts fit perfectly, and and bolted it together. So I bolt these on, and then I've got these pieces of angle that I'll bolt down here to the exact positions in the motor mounts, and that'll be my spots where I'll weld the jig together first. That way the jig will be set, it'll be correct with those points. And then after that, I can unbolt the jig from here and here, and then bolt it into position after I've got all that suspension off and the upper mounts cut away. You also have to drill the pockets out bigger and then reinforce the edges of them. There was a kit back when they sold this new that there was a little pocket that they gave you to weld in there. I'm going to make my own. Luckily, I have access to a plasma table, so I'll be cutting new rings for those pockets when I go to cut those out and weld it. Thought I'd go ahead and show a little bit of the next process. I went ahead and took that suspension off of there. Those older suspensions are not fun to take off. You can kind of see here what I'm going to have to do. All this upper assembly has to be cut off. You know, if you want to run the stock stuff and make it look stock, you're never going to want to do this. And if you're not confident in welding structural stuff, you're never going to want to do this. That's why this upgrade is a little bit more cumbersome than a lot of them. You can just buy A-arms that fit these, give you a little better geometry. But, you know, for the price and I'm confident at welding, I'm not worried about it. Alright, so I thought I'd go ahead and show a little bit of cutting. I was able to borrow the plasma cutter from work here. So we'll see what kind of it does for this cut. You know, it's good. Mainly you can do this with an angle grinder or anything else. It just makes pretty quick work of it. So I'll show a little bit of how I'm going to be cutting this frame apart to get it ready for this new suspension. Definitely don't do what I do. You're supposed to be wearing more safety gear than blank sleeves and whatnot. Okay, so here we are. I've got the template back in place, and I've got it bolted in position. I did check a bunch of measurements here from the distance here, as well as I took at different points off of the frame back to just make sure that that was in the right spot. So now that it's all there, I've got some points marked out here. I'm going to do some more cutting because those flanges have now been cleaned off for the most part, and they're gonna have to set down into the frame. You can see here where I'm gonna have to notch the frame out where those are going to sit. And there's gussets on this that were added on as well as part of the kit. I'm actually going to add more gusseting than this before all is said and done here. But I thought I'd go ahead and show you a little bit of the next step, and we'll go from there. I'll get this cut out and kind of show you what it's in after it's all mocked up into place before I go to weld. Okay, so I've got the jig back on the car. I went ahead and got those cut out, and those brackets are now pretty much in place. Got them pretty well welded. I am going to add the steel rings on the outside, and I'm actually going to add more gusset. Thought I'd show a little bit the next step here. I've got these pretty much welded in, And you can see here, I actually added additional gusseting. You know, the factory or the original kit pretty much only came with this one gusset here. And I went ahead and added additional gussets on each side of this bracketry just to make sure this thing doesn't try and move on me. You know, they didn't really have that initially, but you know, and when I weld this thing, I really like to make sure, you know, I've got really solid welds along here. You know, the MIG welder, yeah, there's some splatter and whatnot, and I haven't even ground these yet. I might grind them just slightly. But that just, I've got really good penetration in those things now, and there's a lot of heat. And the other thing about this is when you're welding, you know, when you're putting that kind of weld on a car, you definitely want to make sure that you're not, there's no weight on the car. You know, there's the only weight on the front of that car is just the weight of the frame itself. You know, it's all being supported from back there. I'm not supporting it up here on the front of the car. Those are things that, you know, when you're doing structural welding and whatnot, you're definitely, you know, you just don't want anything warping and moving around. So I really like where I've got those brackets. I'm going to clean them up a little bit more. And at that point, I'm just going to shoot some paint on them, you know, get some epoxy on them and just get this thing ready to put the suspension back on. So we'll go on to the next step. Okay, went ahead and finished her up. Painted everything up and got all the assembly back together here. You know, everything turned out really good. I've got the original brakes that came with the car on it. Like I said, I'm going with those because mainly I want to do a 15-inch rim. And I'm going to sell the brake kit that came on it. You know, it's probably kind of silly. This suspension's really overkill for the rim and tire package on this car, but it'll ride a lot better. I have adjustability here in ride height. It's very easy. Geometry is going to be excellent for cornering. This thing will corner way better, and that is a brand new steering gear as well that came with it. I mean, new as in the kit. You know, it had probably about 4,000 miles on it from the Craigslist purchase there. But yeah, I got the sway bar ends, got huge sway bar that came with it. This is still a very versatile, a very competitive kit when it comes to a lot of the suspension systems out there. So overall, I think it turned out really well. And hey, if you thought this was fun to watch at all and want to keep seeing updates of this car, hit like and subscribe. One other thing I'm going to be doing next, this is going to be my LS1. Obviously, I've cleaned it up, I've painted it, I've actually put a cam in it. So I'll be doing a video of that. And kind of the whole engine mock-up assembly coming up here in a couple weeks or so. Thanks.